Thank you for joining us, Sherrilyn.
Thank you for having me.
Did we exaggerate the threat that Donald Trump posed to democracy?
No, we did not. We did not, Jen. And I think that is widely understood at this moment. The question is, why did so many choose um, to underestimate what we were facing and what we were confronting? And I think that's the question we really have to grapple with. So many of us were absolutely clear. Many of us were absolutely clear in 2015. And I would say for myself, one of the things that was tremendously frustrating at that time, I was leading a civil rights legal organization, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And that year and years into Trump's first term, I would be asked, why do you think that Trump, is racist? Is he really? Or is he just saying certain kinds of things to get a reaction? And I found this so annoying. It finally got to the point where I just refused to answer the question anymore. They would say, lay out for me the case. And I thought, this is crazy. This is an intelligent, often reporter at a mainstream publication. These weren't always white reporters. Sometimes they were Black reporters, I think, who felt they had to have the subject say this and justify it. And I just got tired of it. And I felt there was a willful effort not to see who Trump was and what he represented. And you'll remember the countless stories of, going to diners in Ohio and Pennsylvania and trying to understand the voters who supported Trump and what did they really want, refusing to deal with the elephant in the room and what was staring them straight in the face. So I think that was one part of it. The other part of it was, and I've written about this, people did not want to be moved out of their area of expertise. They desperately wanted everything to be normal. I've been following political campaigns since I was a kid because my dad was a political junkie. And so I know the way it goes. I haven't, the only political convention I've ever missed was the Republican convention this year. Because I said, I'm not watching this. It's not a convention. And the only inauguration I've ever missed was the inauguration of Donald Trump this year. I've been watching these, campaigns, conventions, inaugurations since 1972, since I was a very little girl. And I know what the choreography is. And I wish it could be the way I expect it to be also, but it's not. It's not. And I think that some reporters and other pundits and other prominent leaders have so desperately wanted to stay in their comfort zone, the comfort zone from which they feel comfortable reporting about the Supreme Court, reporting about politics, the both sides folks, right? Like they just want it to so desperately to be normal because that's the place of their expertise. And I think that needs to be confronted. When I say I want people to admit that they were wrong about, tamping down the threat, it's not because I want to say, I was right and you were wrong, nana, nana, nana. That's not the point. It's I want to understand how and why, and you should want to understand you were so wrong because these are sophisticated, intelligent people who have been, in their at the top of their field for a very long time. So when you have this kind of catastrophic failure of analysis, we need to understand why.
Absolutely. Let's go through the various aspects of society, and I'd like to hear how you assess their response to the Trump phenomenon. Let's start with the politicians. What kind of grade would you give? What kind of assessment? Have they gotten better with time?
Well, certainly not the Republicans. The Republicans have
That's
actually
true.
gotten worse, right? The Republicans have actually gotten worse. In 2015, when Trump was running for election, we had Republicans from Lindsey Graham to Marco Rubio to Ted Cruz who saw Trump for what he was and who were very vocal and very clear about the danger that he represented. Uh, Obviously, that changed. They changed. They decided instead to put expedience and their own the kinds of careers they wanted to have ahead of the truth. And as Trump grew more powerful, and that's what you realize many of these folks didn't understand, uh, he became less, less compromising. He had less to lose. He could really turn the screws. And now these folks became afraid of their livelihoods. I've never seen, I'd never understood how desperately members of Congress want to hold on to their jobs until the last 7 or 8 years. I just didn't know, because I always thought, well, they can make much more money lobbying. They can do all these other things. They can be TV pundits. It's not like, you're going to be shaking a tin can on the street, if you're no longer a United States senator. But I realize how desperately they want this job. They want the office. They want a staff. They want people who look up to them. They want the title. They want to get their hair cut in the Senate barbershop for life. I think Jeff Sessions still shows up there. And they want all of the emoluments of office and the feeling of it. And I had not accounted for that. So politicians have not covered themselves in glory. Certainly not the Republicans. The Republicans are the reason why we have Donald Trump. Honestly, they had the chance, particularly after, certainly with the first impeachment, but especially after January 6th, to the Senate could have convicted him after that impeachment in the House, and he would have been done with public life. But they proved themselves to be unable to do that. And once Kevin McCarthy made his trip down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring, it was pretty much a done deal. And so Republicans have done an abysmal job. And in my view, they are the ones responsible for giving away American democracy. Democrats are learning far too slowly that this is real, and that you cannot use the rhetoric that you used to use, about both sides and bipartisanship. And I lived through this. I had a number of meetings with Joe Manchin. There were lots of attempts to meet with Kristen Sinema, who had no interest in meeting with civil rights leaders. And the mantra of bipartisanship it's just silly. It just doesn't fit with this time. But Democrats were not able to let it go. And they believed they have been, looking for the great white whale for decades, which is the mythical white Reagan voter, white Republican voter who used to be a Democrat. And the electorate has changed so powerfully. And the Democrats are still talking about an electorate that existed a long time ago. Even, Clinton Democrats, right? You hear James Carville talking in ways that suggest that he thinks the electorate can be returned to what it was, when in fact it cannot. It cannot even be returned to the Obama electorate. We have a new electorate, and we have to deal with that. So politicians are not doing great. Democrats are coming around and learning, but they have to learn more quickly and have to pivot, I think, more completely and more effectively than they've done thus far.
The public. We've seen a spate of public demonstrations. How do you think the public is reacting? And have they, frankly, been ahead of the politicians?
For sure, for sure. As is appropriate. I actually think the public should be ahead of the politicians, right? And so I think that is absolutely true. I would say, given the fact that, a year ago, Donald Trump was able to garner, nearly 80 million votes, I can't say I have a tremendous confidence in the public either, right? There is a public that is willful in its desire to have Donald Trump on the scene. And I think that's just real. What we have seen, the reason we are in this moment, particularly with Donald Trump 2.0, is that American voters have shown themselves to be ill prepared and immature and ill equipped to actually vote in a way that is responsible and appropriate for voters in the most powerful country in the world that used to be considered the leader of the free world. That's an actual responsibility. It's not just you get to vote whatever your feelings are, and that you don't get to vote in a way that just feeds your desire to be entertained. When I hear people saying, including, I heard a famous country artist saying this the other day, that, I really like Donald Trump because he talks like me. And what I thought was, you don't talk so good, And I'm not sure why you would want the leader of your country, let alone the leader of the most powerful country in the world, to talk like you. You want the president to be better than you. You want the president to be more disciplined. You want the president to be more compassionate. You want the president to be stronger. You want a president who's better than you, not a president who's just like you. And we started this with George W. Bush. I'd like to have a beer with him. I just don't think that's necessary, and I don't think that's part of the resume. And so I think what we have seen is that the American electorate, frankly, is immature and unprepared for this country to be a leader in the world. And that's now done. We are not a leader in the world, not of anything good at this moment. And we will not be able to recapture our stance very easily. So, if at all. So I think that's one way to think about the public. I do think it's lovely to see more in the public understanding that you have to come out of your house, you have to rally, you have to make phone calls, you have to be an active citizen. It's not enough for you to just show up and vote and then go back in your hole for the next 4 years. So I think that has dawned on many Americans, like speaking from my own community. Um, I have been very proud of my community because we have been on point since 2015. And some of the great work that has come out of came out of Trump the first time around out of his first presidency came from lawyers working in the space of civil rights, came from protests that were sparked by civil rights activists who have really demonstrated a keen sense of what justice is supposed to mean in this country and have been unafraid to demand it. And but I think that this last election it was really a blow. We see it as a powerful rebuke of our presence as full citizens in this country. And and I think, that will inure to the detriment of the entire country. I don't think this is a moment in which this country should be in any way proud of itself, to be honest with you. And so I think I love, however, to see that, a number of leaders, we're doing lots of strategy work behind the scenes, lots of writing, lots of connection, lots of rethinking about strategy and comms. And so I wouldn't say that, anyone is checked out. But I do think that after something like that election last November, we all do have to pause. The problem, as you and I both know, is we don't have much time because Trump is moving fast. And so I've been really happy to see the protests happening now. We've had 2 major days of protests. I actually like the fact that they're kind of decentralized. I think, again, the media is trained to see the big mass protest in DC because, it begins with the March on Washington, and then we should also always have this big mass protest in DC. But I like these decentralized protests happening around the country. It brings more people into it. It's a harder target for those who are opponents and gives everyone something to do. And we need to be united as a nation in that way. If you're in California, the chance that you're going to get to the big DC protest is slim, or if you're in Portland, or if you're in Birmingham. And so I think it's exciting that people have found that the place to protest is in your own state or in your own community, and let your voice be heard there.
Civil society. We have seen this pattern of Trump trying to pick off one law firm, one university, but recently we have seen 180 universities come together. We've seen a solidarity statement from civil society groups. How do you assess civil society in this?
Stunned, to be honest with you, Jen, at the capitulation that initially happened. I'm still, turning it over in my head. And I'm really happy to see Harvard and Princeton and so many other universities now beginning to stand up and stand strong. I'm happy now to see, some law firms. I'm stunned by the capitulation of major law firms to Trump to be willing to sign these bizarre agreements. I can't believe it. Sometimes it's just I can't believe that a venerable program like the Skadden Fellows, that are these, wonderful young lawyers who've been dispatched to organizations for the last 35 years, I've met so many of them and supervised so many of them and interviewed so many of them over the years. And they're some of the best leaders in our country. And that they would, make an agreement to to place, fellows in a particular place. I mean, to basically give away the brand. I just don't understand it. And I think that also requires some study. Whatever the reason, I'm really happy to see the turn. And you know what I think it tells us, Jen, is we have to begin to talk about civil society leadership. And we need university leaders who understand the role of the university in a democracy. You know, hiring someone as a president of a university because they ran a super successful hedge fund is probably not a great idea, right? Because when crisis happens, when the stuff hits the fan, you need someone who can articulate and who feels it in their bones what the purpose of this particular institution of civil society is all about. And so, you know that I've been writing and talking about the legal profession since the first Trump administration and how important the legal profession is to upholding the rule of law and why we have to assess ourselves and take seriously our oaths and hold the line on the rule of law. So, I just think seeing these firms capitulate it was the first time I was frightened. It was the first time I was frightened in the 10 years that Trump has been on the scene because I just thought, how can it be? How can law firms, not some little itty bitty law firm that has, few clients but the best, the what I know to be the best of the best, uh, agree to turn over their independence in large measure to this administration or any administration or any administration. I would be horrified if they were willing to sign such an agreement with President Obama or President Clinton or President Biden. I would be horrified. So, uh, it's early days on the resistance that has sprung up among universities and law firms, which I'm really happy to see with Perkins Coie and others. But we really have to spend some time analyzing what that was about and what it means and ensuring that that kind of thing never happens again.
And what I would add, I know you have recognized this, is that labor unions have been the most stalwart, the most courageous in
Yes,
fighting at every turn. And if Americans didn't understand the role of labor unions in democracy, hopefully they do now.
for sure.
Um,
For
and
sure.
so that is a blessing. As we reach the end of our time, I'd like you to take us out of this day. Where do we go forward? And what do you say to people who want to give up, who say, oh, I'm tired or it's useless. I'm going to go back to my stamp collection or do whatever else in society. What would you
How
say to
nice
them?
for them. How nice for them. I come from a tradition of people who understand the long game and who understand the power of democratic imagination and determination. The men and women who, uh, accomplished the breaking of Jim Crow in this country, of legalized segregation in this country, had only ever known legalized segregation, right? Their grandparents, for many of them, had been enslaved. The Thurgood Marshalls and the Robert Carters and the Constance Baker Motleys had only ever, and the Jack Greenbergs had only ever known a world in which there was Jim Crow segregation. And yet they had a vision for a different world. It wasn't a blueprint. They weren't trying to make America great again, right? There was nothing to go back to. But they had this democratic imagination of how we would fulfill the words of our Constitution, and they set about a strategy. Now, from the time that Thurgood Marshall won his first successful civil rights case in 1935, striking down the exclusion of Black students at the University of Maryland Law School in Baltimore, to Brown versus Board of Education, in which the Supreme Court struck down legalized state-sanctioned segregation in education, was less than 20 years. So 1935 to 1954 is 19 years. Um, and that's remarkable, right? Because they were not even full citizens themselves. You know, when Thurgood Marshall was litigating those cases, when he was litigating the Oklahoma segregation case, he couldn't even eat in the cafeteria of uh, of the courthouse in Oklahoma. So, so I come from a tradition of people who just understand the long game. Now, I'm not willing to wait 19 years, and neither are you, right? Some of us have to look into the face of our kids and our grandkids, and it is a sacred pact that you will hand your children a world that is at least as good, if not better, than the one that was given to you. And none of us can say that. We have actually broken that pact at this moment. So to those people who think that they can check out, I would say, you don't have the right to check out. And if you will notice, we are making progress. It's strategic. I said from the beginning that we could not fight the forces arrayed against us if they were all lockstep. We couldn't fight Trump and Elon and the Republicans and the business community, and we couldn't do it. And so what I said was we had to begin to work on creating space between them, starting with Elon. And we did that, right? If the Tesla protests across the country actually did weaken Elon. Of course, he was mostly weakened by his own, capriciousness and his lack of self-control. But it is true that that was done by grassroots protests that sprung up around the country. I know he'd like to think people are being paid to protest, but no, absolute outrage brought people out and continues to bring people out across the country. And so now he is prepared to slink back to Tesla. Now, nothing will undo at this moment all of the damage that he's done. I don't mean to suggest that, but we've already created that separation, right? Next up is the separation between the Republicans in Congress and Trump. And we're beginning to see that happen. We saw that beginning to happen with the tariffs, where you had Republican members of Congress, many of them behind the scenes, scared to death because their own constituents are saying, what the hell are you doing to us? What are you doing to our small businesses? What are you doing to our farmers? What are you doing to our universities and who rely on federal dollars for research and so forth, right? So I would say to people, don't get weary in well-doing. Stay the course. We've got to break the links between these folks who are standing together. And then we have the most powerful election we're going to have in a long time in a year. I'm not focused on 2028. I'm focused on 2026. The most important thing right now is getting that gavel out of the hand of Mike Johnson. And that means showing up next year and ensuring that the Democrats can take over the House. Because all of this that's happening, all of this that's happening in the federal government, all that Elon Musk has been able to do, all of the bloodletting, all of the money that has been used to extort people could not happen if Congress were standing fully in its job. All of that money has been appropriated by Congress, and rightfully the president has no right to reallocate or try to misappropriate money that Congress has already allocated pursuant to its constitutional authority. The problem we have is that we have a Congress that has decided to lay down and to turn over their power to the executive. That's the constitutional crisis. The constitutional crisis is that one branch of our government has decided not to do their job and instead to turn their power over to another branch of government, which is not how our constitutional architecture was created. So I would say to people, stay the course, continue to apply pressure to break apart this wall of opposition, and remember your duty, your obligation to try and hand over the world in better condition than it was given to you.
I could not say it any better. Thank you so much for joining us and finishing our day at the 100 Days Conference.
Thank you, Jen.